continuing on with this color wheel project. I have definitely done quite a bit since the last recording, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I've mostly just gone about and strengthening the intensity of the layers of colors, both somewhat in the large shape petal as well as this first overlap area. I've done a lot of work and added stronger layers of color. One thing I decided to do is to, in this third overlap area, instead of going straight dark, I'm gonna just do a little bit of scrubbing out. So I'm going to demonstrate that on that's my phone. I'm busy. I'm not good enough at editing to fuss with that, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sing an okay. Hopefully that's going to go away now. I'm using a small round number 2, which you may or may not have. A round number 4 would probably still be okay, but I'm being detaily. And what I'm doing, it's a synthetic number 2, so it's a little bit, it's one of the reasons I like small synthetic brushes, is because I often do stuff like this. And the softer brushes that are great for layering in big layers of paint aren't really good at scrubbing away. Mostly I'm just reactivating the color, the paint that's there, with a little bit of water. Once again, I'm still sort of defining. There's a lot of paint layers going on here, so eventually the establishing the boundaries gets trickier and trickier. Because the water will want to sort of not stop where you want it to stop. But I'm just pouring a little bit of painting a little bit of painting water on there and agitating, activating, waking up that color, as it were. And it will, depending on what pigments you're trying to do this to, it will work quite easily or kind of not at all. Some paints are what's called staining, and you can't do a whole lot of this. So I'm gonna let me see. I'm gonna call that good for now. The phthalo colors are notorious for being staining, which is partly one of the appeals. They get so intense, and it can be very cool, but if not cool temperature-wise, but neato. But it can make it difficult, if not sort of impossible, to scrub away very much. Although this is kind of working nicely, and I just wanted a little change. I was thinking of making that part even darker, but that third overlap, wait a minute, first overlap, second overlap, really dark. But I'm having fun with other areas being dark, and I wanted a little relief. And in fact, I may sort of it is interesting. It can be an interesting effect to where you're scrubbing is turning lighter, and the paint that you're pushing to the sides is making an outline effect, which I happen to like very much. In fact, I will talk a little bit about doing my own kind of outline effect on the outside petals here, and but not right now. So that's scrubbing away that. Let's see. This guy is an interesting situation because I think I did try scrubbing it out a little bit, but it's again painting with water. Just clear water. I'm going to try to define that scrubbed out area a little bit better. As we study values, what's going on here is that it's not so much that I need to try to make this overlap area lighter as much as I need to, or I'm going to, or want to make it stand out, make this lower area of the first overlap darker. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to let you know that this shape is lighter by making that darker. Obviously I'm going to wait till it's dry. But while I'm waiting for that to dry, I will continue around. Another thing I'm considering, and this is all sort of personal artistic thoughts that you're welcome to sort of think about and emulate, or you can try an idea of your own, obviously. Hope that goes without saying. You can always, in fact, I encourage trying ideas of your own. But at some point, the colors are going to be, as I get around to the yellow, it's already light in value. So I am toying with the idea of transitioning from scrubbing out to going darker. I'll probably need to show that, kind of hard to explain. So instead of I didn't get that didn't scrub out that well. Naphthol is one of those that doesn't like scrubbing very much, but man, I love it. Here's a good example. And it may work, it may not, but I'm in that. I try to get in that mood of I wonder what would happen if, as much as possible. And I've been doing watercolor long enough to have a good sense of. Have you been able to see anything that I've been mixing? Probably not. Oh, that's because I've been painting with water. Familiar enough to be, to know that taking risk is going to a risk here and a risk there will have an effect that may work and may not. If it doesn't work, can usually figure out some way to make it work. So that was getting a lot darker, which I didn't think was working. And when I say darker, this is lighter than the colors next to it, and this is darker than the colors next to it. It was a little too much darker. But it has to do with the inherent value of any one of these colors. So it's still sort of a scrubbed out with an outline effect, which, yeah, I like that. I got a little loose with the line quality there, which I can decide to fuss with after it's dry or not. Let's see, I'm going to do kind of the same thing with a little bit darker yellow green. This is an interesting area right here because there's a lot of this overlap. There's yellow and yellow green and some yellow orange. So it's, oh, that was too dark. It is there's competition for who's gonna, what temperature is this color. There's sort of, is it going to be a warm orangey thing, or is it going to be more of a cool greeny thing? And boy, that's not doing a whole lot at all, is it? Let's see. That one's not grabbing me as much as the other one. I think just because there's not enough value change in the middle of it. Maybe I'll leave that like that for now. Back, which gives me the opportunity to come back to this one to sort of talk about how I can tell you a little bit more that shape is lighter without trying to make it lighter, but by making the color around it a little bit darker. This will take a light touch, so I'll put on my light touch fingers, and I'm going to try to mostly just define without kind of getting into the entire shape. I'm going to put down a little bit of that darker color. I'm going to rinse all the paint out of that little brush and come back with kind of a damp brush, not dry, not wet. To practice sort of learning just the right amount of dampness and blending that away. I can keep adding a little bit darker while that's still wet. I can I'm getting pretty detailed here. This may be driving some of you crazy. And some it'll be, ooh, I love detail. It's a fine line between adjusting till it looks right versus fussing and agonizing. So where it looks overworked. Here I'm kind of, what I was talking about, that outline effect around the petals. I'm sort of doing one side, and then my plan, at least for now, my idea is to come back, and I've done this side of the petal come back and do that other side and in the opposite direction. This is probably going to turn into one of those situations where I'm so focused in, so close, so tight, that I really can't judge very well what the heck is, if exactly what I'm doing now is how I'm going to want it to be. So detail-y. When you go in that much for detail, you do need to make sure that you can come back out, step back, and in this case, hold it away from your eyes a little bit further. I'm being a dot printer right now. I can explain that later. So hopefully this is, once again, hopefully there's a good example of fussing too much, sort of, was probably, could have let it go a little while ago. But, so that's sort of that outline effect. It's going to be interesting with the yellow because, yellow doesn't really go any darker. So what do you do when you wanted to outline a yellow petal with a dark yellow? Mostly I go to just start leaning towards that yellowy orange. So it's a color that's definitely darker, but still very closely related. And that's standing out a little bit more than I want it to, but I'm going to try this. I'm going to rinse that out, get my damp brush, and soften it up a bit. I want to make sure to really lightly soften the paint that's there as opposed to scrub up some of the lower layers, because that will sort of turn into that little thing which I've fussed with a little too much. But anyways, I'm going to lean back and hopefully you can see that too. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Let's see here. It's an interesting area here because I'm sort of going darker next to this one, lighter next to that one. So this guy in the middle here is not, it's not quite clear what I'm going to do. And a good rule of thumb is well, I was just going to say is to be clear on what you do, but that sort of goes counter to what I said a couple minutes ago of having an attitude of, I wonder what would happen if. I guess I certainly do have a clear idea that I want this overlap area, the second closer to the center overlap area, to stand out from the first overlap area. And I'm using, the inherent qualities of the inherent value of whatever the color is that I'm working with to decide if I need to push it back, if I want to bring it back a little bit lighter, if I want to push it a little bit darker. And we're going to be talking a lot about values and value scales, and really as, if not more important than color. They're all important exactly what I believe, so I should go ahead and not say things that I really don't believe. And I believe oh, I am having fun making these videos. Let's see. So that's not scrubbing away a whole bunch either, but that's enough for now. I am going to do one last thing. That line was getting sort of a little not continuous enough. So it's coming along. Or maybe I can at least sort of do one more outline thing here. I'm pretty sure that I have a dark red on my brush. This sort of turns into, you know, kind of drawing with an ink, a fine tip ink pen. Certainly not as dark as the other side, but I'm gonna go get some coffee because anyways, come along. I have another idea also for the center part that I'm not going to share yet, but I will. Okay, go paint. Have fun.